Good evening, everyone, and thank you for watching this special bulletin. I am pleased to announce that the MTA and the district have come to a proposed agreement for a 2-year rollover of this CBA. It will be 1.25% next year and 1.25% the year after. There are no language changes in the CBA, so health insurance is not rising. However, I do want to go over some of the finer points, and you will have the opportunity to discuss this at your building meetings this week. But I do want to go over the entire MOA, which you can read and take a look at. I've attached it in the bulletin. So what we have is 1.25% on salary, including the salary schedule, tenure stipend, professional diploma or doctorate, longevity, and credits. So everything on the salary page is going up 1.25% on both the teachers and nurses scale, except for BA Step 1. And by not increasing BA Step 1, two things happen. One, MTA dues remain stagnant for the next 2 years because that's what MTA dues are based off of. But so does Appendix B. So the district is refusing to increase Appendix B over the next 2 years based on basically they feel as though they've done enough good faith in Appendix B in the last 2 years, having paid sports coaches and clubs for shortened time periods, Zoom meetings, and in some cases last spring even no seasons. So there will not be an increase given to Appendix B. And this has nothing to do with money. This is a principled aspect of the board. So even had we not gone the way of a rollover and we had negotiated a contract, the district would not look to increase or would look to block increases to Appendix B. So let's talk a little bit about some of the benefits of a type of deal like this. The first is that there are no language changes, which means we are essentially getting 1.25% over the next 2 years without giving up any language, and that includes health insurance increases. So health insurance will remain at the percentage in the contract, which means if you're retiring in the next 2 years, there will not be an increase to the health insurance, which means when you retire, you'll pay 50% of what we're currently paying, and that won't be increased. So that's an important aspect. We had an amazing discussion tonight from our executive committee as we mulled this over and talked about some of the positives and negatives. And so I'm going to use a lot of those questions to kind of drive my explanation of this MOA and how we got to it. The first is that this really developed out of nowhere in the last couple of weeks. We had obviously appointed a negotiations team a month ago, and 2 months ago, and when we did that, we had the full intention of negotiating the next CBA. During that time period, the district had asked us to hold off on starting negotiations because they were waiting for the New York State budget to be finalized. At that point, we said to them, that's fine, we'll hold off and wait, but would you consider a rollover agreement? Never heard back from them. And then the budget was set on the end of the first week of April, came in a little late this year. And literally 2 weeks later, we were presented with the rollover agreement. So I want to make clear that our negotiations team is just as surprised as we were. And so while they were preparing to negotiate and we were preparing to negotiate, and they were starting to have those conversations, and I'm sure you were going to them and having the conversations of things that you would like to see changed in the contract, this opportunity suddenly presented itself. So no one was acting in bad faith here. The negotiations team wasn't, asking for feedback and certainly getting it, not thinking this was going to happen. None of us really thought this was going to happen. And in the matter of really a couple of weeks, it got pulled together to happen. The second thing that happened was the idea of doing this rollover and not changing any of the contract language. Now, again, I use the term rollover, and the reason why we use the term rollover in negotiations is it means there's no changes. There's just an addition of money, which is what's happening in this. So I do want to point out, though, that means that anything that is set to expire in the contract, right, that has a sunset date in it, is sunsetting. So, for instance, The one main aspect that we can find in our contract where something sunsets at the end of this CBA is the $15,000 retirement incentive. So that is something that we already knew we were going to have to negotiate in order to get into the next CBA. And since we are not negotiating, or at least we're proposing a rollover agreement, that expires. So there will not be a $15,000 incentive if this MOA is approved and we ratify this MOA. So again, I want to be very clear and upfront about what this is and what it isn't. What this is a little over 2.5% over the next 2 years in salary, okay? And it's focused on everyone's salary, not broken up into other areas. It doesn't take money away to make sure Appendix B gets paid. We already talked about that. That wouldn't be an option anyway, right? Or other areas get increased. It's focused solely on salary, which is something that every member gets. It includes all of the step increases that any members that are making steps would get. The only language you'll see in the MOA is obviously that BA Step 1 will not be increased. We talked about that. And then just the changing of some dates, right, of when the agreement starts, when it expires, when negotiations will start, when that will expire. So the MOA is pretty forward. But again, I want everybody to have that along with this video so that you have the opportunity to mull it over and ask questions. One of the other questions that we talked about during our executive committee meeting was really, why is the district doing this? Because there are 26 locals in our area currently that have been without a contract for now almost a year, that expired in June of 2020. And that is certainly a risk when entering into negotiations, that you don't get a deal done immediately and you go a year without a contract where no one gets an increase. In fact, even our clerical unit here has now been in year 3 without an increase. And certainly, as I did write in the bulletin, I would ask that you keep this MOA confidential until we and the board finish our process, however that goes. Because obviously there are going to be people within the public and within this district that are not going to be happy with the fact that we have been given this offer when they've been waiting 3 years for a contract. Okay, but one of the questions that came up is, again, why did they do this? And we had our labor relations specialist, Michael Perna, on the MTA call, and he was able to answer this because he actually spoke to the attorney from the district who said that this was purely driven by the administrative team, the district leadership brought this to the Board of Ed, in hopes of really recognizing the job that MTA members have done this school year. And so that's why, they're not necessarily asking for anything in return here in order to give out this 2.5 over the next couple of years. So for the first time in a while, it was good to hear that someone was actually valuing and recognizing the work we had been doing. Sure, we all wish it was more than 1.25. And sure, we all wish that we could make some minor changes to language. I mean, I certainly have a few ideas that I would like to get changed in the contract. But I'm sure the district has those ideas too. And I think that the key point here is we have to remember that if the point is 1.25 and 1.25 without language changes, every time we add in a piece of language that we would like to change, that number comes down. And then obviously, if we were willing to give up language, pay more into health insurance, eliminate sick time buyout, whatever the district would want on the language front, more control over personal days, whatever it would be, then the number would go up. So again, we will all have our pet peeves with this. And I certainly know that there was some language that I was looking forward to getting, or hoping that we could get in this contract that now we won't get, that we'll have to wait 2 years to move on. But again, I just am so happy because I think that we can put that aside, realizing that we can now get a salary increase that's comparable to the one that we received in the last CBA, except without the language changes that it took to get to that number in the last CBA. And so it was a little something for us, a little hard for us to wrap our minds around this as to how we came to this. But I can tell you it was very quick, and it really does come down to a recognition of everyone's service this year. And while, again, we would all like to make those little tweaks. I think we have to look at the broader picture here and realize that, we're getting something. Granted, it may not be everything that we want to get, but we're certainly getting something without real sacrifice and certainly no monetary sacrifice. So again, the way this process will work is this will be the announcement that we have, a substantive issue as per the Constitution. What the Constitution says is then that we can't vote for at least 3 days and that a building meeting has to be held between that announcement, which is this video, and the vote. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually hold the vote on May 12th, which we were already set for MTA elections anyway. It turned out that we only have a contested race in our high school building rep election. And so instead of just the high school voting that day on their rep elections, every building will vote on May 12th, all right? In your own buildings all day during your work day. And then we will tally that. In the meantime, you'll be holding your building meetings. We are going to attempt, Kate LaSousa and I, to at least one of us be at every one of those building meetings to answer your questions. And then certainly if you come up with any further questions or if we can't make your meeting, I've included our emails in the bulletin here so that you can ask those questions. But again, like I said, there are going to be some questions. We had a tremendous discussion amongst the executive committee. It lasted for over an hour before we actually approved this, and it was a really high-level discussion. So hope that you're looking at this as the whole, and I hope you have a great night. I'm certainly excited to bring this forward, and we will see you in your building meetings.